Youth Sunday School. Today is our fourth and final week of our Black History series, and today's focus is Bayard Rustin. So let's jump right in. Bayard Rustin was born in 1912 in Westchester, Pennsylvania, and he grew up in Pennsylvania. He died in 1987 at the age of 75 of natural causes. He was raised by his grandparents, and he attended Wilberforce University, Cheyney University, and City College of New York. So he was very well educated. He went to 3 different colleges. He was briefly a member of a communist league in the 30s, but he soon quit because he was disillusioned with it and didn't actually like it, and this followed him for the rest of his life. Bayard Rustin was a pacifist, as in someone who is nonviolent and believes in solving problems peacefully at all costs. He was heavily influenced by 3 different sources. 1, Quakers in Pennsylvania, 2, Gandhi, and 3, A. Philip Randolph. So, Quakers are historically also called the Religious Society of Friends, and it would make sense that Bayard Rustin was influenced by them since he grew up in Pennsylvania. Quakers are a Protestant Christian denomination. They're largely located in Pennsylvania. They very much emphasize pacifism and nonviolence. So it makes sense that Bayard Rustin was against nonviolence if he was influenced by Quakers. And also, a lot of Quakers are known for refusing to serve in the military due to their pacifism on a religious basis. Bayard Rustin also was influenced by Gandhi, who was an Indian activist and emphasized nonviolent resistance and helped free India from British rule. There's a lot more information about Gandhi, but I'll just let you Google him. And then A. Philip Randolph was an American labor unionist, civil rights activist, and socialist politician. And Bayard Rustin worked for him on more than one occasion and worked with him on organizing protests, marches, and things like that. So those were the 3 main influences on Bayard Rustin's, ideologies and ways of thinking. More things to know about Bayard Rustin. 1, he was openly gay, and he was arrested and put in jail or prison more than once due to being gay, as well as for his peaceful protests. So part of what makes Bayard Rustin special is his sexual orientation and the fact that he refused to hide it, even though he ended up facing consequences for it. He was still determined to be who he was and who God made him. He was often pushed to the side in civil rights causes for Black Americans because of his sexual orientation and brief communist background. So those things kind of combined against him, even within the things that he was working towards and working for. He traveled to India at one point to learn more about Gandhi's nonviolence. And that's important to know because he worked with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the 1950s and 60s. Actually worked really closely side by side him, helping him organize and put together protests like the Montgomery bus boycotts and the March on Washington. And actually, Bayard Rustin taught Martin Luther King Jr. much of what he knew about Gandhi and nonviolent resistance. And Bayard Rustin was one of the main masterminds behind the March on Washington. He organized and planned it. And that was the march at which Martin Luther King Jr. was kind of the figurehead and is the famous one known for the March on Washington, and he gave the I Have a Dream speech. But that wouldn't have been possible without the work of Bayard Rustin. One thing that we can learn from Bayard Rustin is intersectionality. The interaction between a person's different social categories that creates different types of discrimination for that person. So, if you think of all the different identities or social standings people might have that cause them to be discriminated against, such as race or sexual orientation or a disability or gender identity or all of these things, those can combine together and interact in different ways to create different levels of discrimination and oppression that people experience. And so for Bayard Rustin, he was 1, Black, and 2, gay, and so he had to deal with racism on the one hand, and he had to deal with homophobia on the other hand, and so both those things combined together made him face double discrimination instead of just one kind. And so that's how intersectionality works. Another way that intersectionality could happen is if a person is a woman and black. So they have to deal with racism and sexism, not just one or the other. Intersectionality often makes things difficult for people if they've got more than one thing working against them in society. Before we wrap this lesson up for today, I want to share with you a couple of quotes from Bayard Rustin. One of them says, "We need in every Bayan community a group of angelic troublemakers." And so if you think about this quote in light of the fact that Bayard Rustin emphasized nonviolence for activism, then you imagine what a holy troublemaker might be like. Someone who definitely isn't hitting or fighting or trying to shoot at anybody, but is still getting in the way of things. And that quote follows up with, "The only weapon we have is our bodies, and we need to tuck them in places so wheels don't turn." So you kind of imagine like a person kind of stuffing themselves in the gears of a machine, and then the machine can't keep working because the gears are clogged up. And so in that way, we can kind of use ourselves and our nonviolence as ways of just clogging up the way that things work and forcing people in power to stop and examine what's going on. And I think that these two quotes are very prevalent, especially the quote about angelic troublemakers, because I believe Jesus was and is an angelic troublemaker. For the most part, Jesus wasn't violent. There was that one time when he went through the temple and knocked a bunch of stuff over and hit people with a whip because they were selling things in God's holy space. But other than that moment, Jesus was largely peaceful. Jesus was a holy troublemaker, an angelic troublemaker. And so I think we can learn from Jesus and we can learn from Bayard Rustin that when you want to see change, you can create some holy trouble. You can be an angelic troublemaker where really you're not doing anything wrong, but you're still getting in the way. You're still forcing things to change just by way of getting in the way. That's about all I have for you. I hope you've enjoyed this series of Black History lessons for Black History Month. I tried to pick people who were lesser known than the usual giants we learn about in Black history, and I hope that as we move into Lent, you've got more knowledge and inspiration to go on for your faith journey. I am looking forward to seeing you all in person again soon, in a month, and hope that you have a good spring break as well. Okay, bye!